Okay, I will hand over to Denise, and if anything goes wrong, I'll jump back up.
So I don't know whether the camera's on. It is. Okay.
Tell everyone to put on their cameras.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome as well to online delegates. If you would like to put your cameras on, we can see you on the screen, and that would be brilliant if you want to. Hey, somebody's done that. Well done.
When you wave, she's actually over in that
sorry,
there.
I'm waving at the screen instead of at the camera. So without, I'll just mention again, as the same procedure as for this morning, if you've got questions, online people, please put them in the chat and we'll start off with your questions after the talk. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Matt Thurston from the University of Leeds, who's going to talk to us about developing positive global attitudes in a TNE environment, which I'm wondering what it means. I'm sure we'll find out shortly. So over to you,
Okay.
Matt.
Thanks very much. So yeah, I've realised straight away after having walked into this room and had comments from two people that I really shouldn't be using acronyms in my titles. So that's a nice learning point for me. So thanks for joining us today. And, you know, I know you must be getting tired at the end of the day. I certainly am. It was an early start this morning. So thanks for joining. So my name's Matt Thurston. So I'm doing my PhD here at the University of Leeds, but also I work at the University of Central Lancashire, where my job entails looking after the English language provision, including work overseas. So TNE here refers to transnational education. So we're talking about all those program, UK degree programs or Australian, American, any international HE work is transnational education, you know, where we teach in another country. So I'm going to be talking about that today. And I'm going to be talking about developing positive global attitudes in a TNE environment, a first step potentially towards global graduates. So I've got to say at the start, I am right at the start of my PhD process. In fact, I've been looking at this subject for 4 months, only part-time. So I'm really at the early stages of my PhD project. And so what I'm doing today is I really want to hear your feedback and comments about what I'm doing. And I'd really like to get some suggestions. So the whole day today has been very much a learning experience for me. So why am I first of all interested in this area? Well, my background is in EAP and working overseas. I've spent most of my career working in China or Singapore for either UK or Australian universities. And one thing that I discovered, especially when working in Singapore, is a lot of my students came to my program there. It was an Australian university degree program with incredibly different motivations to be there. Some of them were coming to Singapore with an intention of using Singapore as a safe stepping stone to Australia or to the UK or to America, a place where they could speak their own language outside class, a place where they could go to restaurants and shops where they were comfortable and they knew what they were looking at in the shops. Then I had another group of students who had come to Singapore just so they could get a foreign degree in what they considered to be the easiest way possible. They never intended doing anything else overseas. What they could do is they could go to class in an Australian university, and as soon as they stepped out of the campus, they didn't have to speak any more English till the next time they walked back into the classroom. So really, they weren't really getting much of an international experience at all in this one. Or they certainly, although they did get a very intercultural experience, because Singapore is definitely not China, their intent was to actually limit that experience as much as possible. And they were explicitly choosing this program and this location to limit their intercultural experience as much as possible. So that's what brought me into this area. So today I'm going to be talking about that sort of got me to think, well, look, we really need to work with these students to get them to look at where their potential opportunities are, what they could do interculturally, what they could do in terms of a future self, where could they go? Because these students were really struggling in the program because really they didn't want to be there. They didn't want to be learning English. This was, as I said, they needed that foreign degree, and they'd gone to the place where they had to do the least English language learning and have the least intercultural experience possible. So that's obviously, it's not all, it's only a certain group of students, but it did get me thinking about, on a lot of programs overseas, we also have cohorts of these students. Okay, so what can we do to try and help these students to see the potential of intercultural communication, of intercultural experiences, and where they could go in the future? So anyway, going on to my presentation, developing positive global attitudes. So first of all, obviously today we've had a lot of people talking about what is intercultural communication. Yeah. Now obviously this is not my specialism at all. As I said, I'm a language teacher, comfortable in language learning motivation theory, not so much in ICC. So, sorry, I'll click and see if that moves me through. Yes, it does. So first of all, where do I see the connection between global graduates and the discourse around that, and the discourse around intercultural communication? Well, personally for me, I found this image here from Andreotti and his co-writers to be extremely useful. Some people today have said, what's the link between global citizenship and intercultural communication? Well, actually, I think all these terms that we're using can be seen to fit under the heading of global citizenship education. Andreotti shows this to have neoliberal, liberal, and critical elements. When we're talking about the neoliberal here, we're talking about those competencies, those things that students need or perceive to need to be successful in the globalized world. Then you've got sort of the more liberal elements, things like universal values, human rights, respect for other cultures. Then more the critical elements, things like pure global citizenship, as in thinking about being participatory in democracy, being active citizens, looking at how you could change the status quo. And I think you can see that many of the ICC frameworks fit within this. They don't fit either in neoliberal or liberal. They often go across. They might have some critical elements there in some ICC frameworks, but not in others. When we talk about global graduates, again, if you look at what universities say about what is a global graduate, you'll also see neoliberal and liberal elements as well coming there. So, as I said, I see both ICC and global graduates fitting within this larger framework. And obviously there's some commonalities. People have been talking today about things like knowledge, skills, and attitudes where the ideas are shared. So when we talk about global graduates or talk about intercultural competency, we talk about knowledge of others. I think nearly all the frameworks do. They might talk about knowledge of global issues, not always, sometimes. In terms of skills, they're always talking about skills of communication and collaboration, okay, across both discourses. And probably also talking about reflection. Now, of course, some people might refer to that as knowledge of self, some people reflection, different terms here, but it appears again in a lot of the discourse. Then, of course, we have attitudes. Again, when we're talking about global graduates or about intercultural competence, we talk about openness to other cultures, openness to different perspectives. And we might talk about interest in global issues as well, but again, that's not in all frameworks. So what I'm trying to say here is that I do think there is obviously a difference between intercultural competence, which most people have been talking about today, and the discourse around global graduates, but there is a lot of overlap there. And it depends on different frameworks, the overlap is more or less, but still quite a bit. Now, so obviously American universities were probably the starting place of talking about global graduates and global graduate attributes. But a recent survey just the other year in the UK found that out of those universities which published their graduate attributes, 70% of those had a global attribute as something that their students would have when they finished their degree. And the number is growing. You know, more and more universities are adding graduate attributes and they're adding global elements to these. So it's something that's becoming quite important. In the case of my university, the University of Central Lancashire, we have 5 graduate attributes. And the first one being obviously most clearly linked to global graduates, being culturally intelligent with a global outlook. You could, of course, argue that some of the other attributes there do have some links to to competencies, things like being workforce ready as well in some of the other attributes. But obviously the main focus in terms of being a global graduate is the first one. So what does the University of Central Lancashire, I'll probably use the acronym UCLAN, it's normally known in the area. What's UCLAN's definition of culturally intelligent with a global outlook? Well, I'll give you the wording here for you to have a read through. It's not written particularly well, but the concepts behind it are quite solid. So students will be able to gather knowledge, understanding, and/or experience of local, regional, and global perspectives. They'll have the ability to be curious and open to new and diverse perspectives and be able to make informed and ethical decisions by being able to reflect on and be aware of their own and others' biases and emotions. They'll have the ability to communicate and collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds with integrity and confidence. I'm not quite sure why they will have the ability to gather knowledge and understanding rather than have knowledge and understanding, but let's leave those points to the side. So what does this mean? Next slide, I'll probably try and pull out the major points. So this is basically saying that all UCLAN graduates should be curious and open to new perspectives. They should make informed and ethical decisions based on self-knowledge of biases. And they should be able to communicate and collaborate with people from diverse backgrounds. Well, that sits fairly well within intercultural competence, I think, as well as talking about global graduates, all those 3 ideas there. So that's what UCLAN says, that all undergraduate students, when they graduate, they should have these attributes. Well, that's fairly tough, you know. Not sure that's the case. It's a target. It's even more a target when you say that these attributes apply not just to students in the UK, they also apply to students who are overseas, who are studying on UCLAN programs overseas. So not only have the home students or students within the UK on a multicultural campus, in a multicultural community, got to have these attributes, but so do students overseas. So of course, overseas, TNE again, transnational education, often the student body is monocultural, especially in places like China. You also got less diverse teaching staff because the majority of the staff will come from the host institution and will probably be from one origin. Also, students will often have a lot less overseas opportunities. Students in the UK have the opportunity to go to other countries, study abroad programs, short trips. They may exist on overseas UK programs, but the opportunities are likely to be a lot more limited. So what opportunities do we have? Okay, so this is where I come in through my background as a language teacher and also come back to EAP today. I think that a great opportunities in terms of developing intercultural competencies and also developing graduate attributes is through foundation programs. Most UK university programs overseas, the degree programs, do have an embedded in foundation program. And of course, foundation programs have quite a lot of flexibility in the content that they deliver, because they're often skills-based, but how those skills are developed over the year, there's quite a lot of flexibility there. So a lot of opportunities. For me, I'm particularly interested in attitudes, and that comes round to my background in English teaching, motivation. So I'll explain a little bit more about why I think that attitudes are important. Well, skills and knowledge developed over a whole program. Intercultural skills and knowledge. Well, this is really a lifelong process here. Okay, they are something that's very important, but we need to work on it. But I really only got 5 minutes left. I'll have to move. Yeah, we started late. Thank you. Thank you. Well, skills and knowledge are developed over a whole program, lifelong learning. Okay. Attitudes are core. Without a positive view of the global community, people are going to find it a lot harder to develop the global knowledge and skills, a lot less likely to develop. And also, positive attitudes should or could lead to greater motivation as well. Why do I say that? Well, you know, I'm not an intercultural competence theorist, but you know, from what I read, a lot of the frameworks on intercultural communication do show that although skills and knowledge and attitudes are intertwined, at the foundation, you do have to have the attitudes. And moving quickly because of time, this also fits into the research on language learner motivation, which I'm sure as many of you would be, as language teachers, would be familiar with. Either the foundational theories from Gardner linking attitudes to motivation, or whether we're talking about more recent theories, things like the Tomoko Yashima's work on international posture, where she links very strongly positive views of the international community through to motivation and willingness to speak in English. And then, of course, we've got work of Zoltan Dörnyei linking, again, attitudes to the ideal L2 self, and therefore, again, into motivation as well. So moving on to what my planned intervention is, and this is where I'd really like to for you to give me some feedback at the end. So the context is 2 university programs which the University of Central Lancashire runs within China. These are taught entirely within China, and they are dual degrees where the students receive a Chinese degree at the end and a UK degree, which does mean that students are very busy because they have modules both from the English side and also from the Chinese side as well. There's 2 programs, as I said, one of which is in the area of sports science and the other in the area of arts and media. The foundation program is mostly the same, just with little tweaks towards the discipline. So my aim is to try and enable students to develop more positive global attitudes through the course of a foundation year. Okay, so the attitudes I'm looking at are a positive view of other cultures and an openness to different perspectives, and also a positive view of the global community and their place within it. Those are the ones I'd like to focus on. As I said, students are very busy, so I intend to embed this intervention within the existing curriculum. They don't have time to do it outside, and also if you do something outside the curriculum, it relies on the buy-in from individual students, and they will weigh up the benefits that they perceive against the time they have to put in. So we have two modules which are well suited to this intervention. We've got a developing academic skills module, where many of you be familiar, very similar modules to, I'm sure, those that you have or do teach on, where students develop the academic skills that they are expected to need on their degree course. Well, these modules are often taught through project-based techniques, and so there's a lot of opportunity for students to study intercultural topics while developing those academic skills. In semester 2, we have a module which is called Professional Communication Skills, which is an ESAP module. That's English for a specific academic purpose. So that's where they're learning the English for their discipline that they'll go on to in the future. And here we have the opportunity to get them involved with thinking about their future selves. Where will they go in their discipline, in their career path, once they've finished their course? What are the opportunities out there for them? And it gets them to be able to consider how they'll interact with people on a local, regional, or global perspective once they leave their degree program. And this has, I hope, a lot of potential to get them motivated and into their study. So the intent, and I know I've not got much time here, but the intent is to do this through a quasi-experimental study with control and experimental groups, dividing them on class basis into the different groups. And I've got 3 different research questions, to develop more. Do they develop more positive views of other cultures and openness to perspectives? Do they develop a more positive view of the global community? And is there a correlation between global attitudes and academic motivation? I hope the answer to all of these is yes, but we'll have to see. Measuring this is very much a work in progress here. I think that this is probably one of the most tricky parts of this, is to measure the outcomes. I'm looking to focus on quantitative surveys, but also introduce some qualitative elements as well into this. So I'm planning to use self-report questionnaires, as would be very common, of course, in the language motivation field, and also common in some also intercultural communication studies as well. I'll devise this for the study because there isn't anything out there at the moment which is really focused on attitudes, okay? And also not on the link between attitudes and motivation, and particularly not in the Chinese context. So I'll be looking to develop something here. But of course, we're all very aware that there are a lot of reservations about self-report questionnaires. How are people really writing in these questionnaires what they truly believe or what they think the researcher wants them to write? How aware are people of their own attitudes? There's a question of, are you really aware of them? And there's been some really good work recently showing that sometimes these explicit report questionnaires do not match what are people's implicit feeling attitudes as well. So we definitely need to have some qualitative elements as well there to give us some further information and to see whether there is any contradictions. So I'm planning to do some global future selves exercises with the students. First of all, at the start of the first semester, to get their view of where they intend going at the start or where they think they will go. and also at the end of the year to see if there's been any change in what they think their future self will be and their place within the global community. Also, of course, I plan to do some semi-structured interviews as well with the students to see the to have a look more at the trends, any trends that can be identified from the questionnaires and also the exercises as well, to sort of follow up and get further information. Okay, I've been told that's time up, so that's fine. And it is actually the end, which is good. So I'd really welcome any questions, especially as this is very early in my research. Yes, please.
I'm a little bit, I'm not sure about this idea of a monoculture and the presumption that people who live in the same country don't have intercultural experience.
I think that's a very relevant point. And if I had listened to your talk earlier today, I may well have rewritten that slide before I handed it in.
I mean, the reason I'm saying that is I actually did a short course on intercultural awareness with a group of Chinese students in a Chinese university. And in the first 15 minutes, I questioned them saying that everybody in China was the same. And after 20 minutes, they were talking about huge diversity.
No, you are quite correct.
Everything we were doing. But the other thing, it depends on what questions you ask people.
Yeah.
So if you ask certain types of questions, you will get certain types of answers.
Yes.
And that's something really to think about, especially in a questionnaire, where you're not face to face with people and seeing what's going on in their faces when you talk to them and so on.
Yeah, I think you're quite correct to mention that referring to a monoculture there is possibly not the most useful way of referring to it. There's probably a better way of describing their experiences of different intercultural communication rather than that. So yes, as I said, if I'd have heard your presentation earlier today, I'd have probably have phrased it in a slightly different way, because it's a very good point. They may not have got experience of international cultural communication, but that does not mean that they don't have experience of intercultural communication. Thank you. Yeah, please.
I've got a question from our online audience. I'm interested to know what the semester 1 project is and what it does to develop IC skills, or is the intention to promote dialogue about it?
Okay, well, thanks, Louise. That's a good question. As I said, I am 4 months into this project, so it is very much a work in progress. So here, though, what it would be is it would be the promote dialogue about interculturality. That's where I would be going for, but that's my concept at the moment, but I haven't actually got in any way along planning that and actually putting it into practice, because that will be what I'll need to do over the next year, next 12 months. Yes, please.
Just wondering now, I've heard you say that your doubts about questionnaires generally, and following on from what Adrian said, looking at questionnaires and semi-structured interviews and talking about attitude and how complex a thing that is to define and measure, why you hadn't considered to limit your sample more but go deeper in the interrogation, so to have non-semi-structured interviews, for example, and using like clean language techniques perhaps to draw out of the participants their sort of true feelings, because I have similar doubts about questionnaires and the value of actually getting the attitude of the person from the questionnaire. So I just, you were saying that you were thinking about suggestions and stuff. I was wondering if non-structured interviews using clean language techniques would serve your purpose regarding attitude a bit better.
Right, thank you. I will have a look into that. I definitely think there are, as I said, I've got my being from a language learning motivation background, which is very questionnaire, self-report questionnaire tends to be quite heavy in that area. That's probably where my instinct has taken me, but that's why I wanted to ask. I'll have a look more into that. Might be an interesting way to go. Yeah, thanks. Is there something? Yeah, please.
Just a quick question. Thank you for presentation. Your title is Developing Positive Global Attitudes in Transnational Education, is it?
Yes.
Environment? A first step towards global graduates. Right. Do you consider yourself a global graduate? And what makes that?
Okay. Well, that's it. There's multiple definitions, and then you've got to look at what is, the definitions coming out from most universities in the UK, and it is very close to what is coming out through intercultural competencies as well. It is those knowledge, skills, and behaviours. There is no one definition of what a global graduate is at the moment. I think that's probably under theorised at the moment. Do I consider myself to be one? I'm not sure if I was when I left university, possibly now, but but not possibly when I left university. No, at that time, I don't think that the university I was at had considered such a thing as part of their, but that's a long time ago now.
I think on that note of personal growth, it's thank you very much, and it's time for you all to go eat more food.
Yeah, thank you. That's all right. It was interesting.
Very hard to keep.